In Jakarta, Indonesia, tragedy has struck a national park. The Komodo National Park has daily tours of their facilities located on a remote island in eastern Indonesia. Heru Rudi Harto, an official at the park, has recently announced an attack of the facility. There was a 2.5-meter-long lizard which appeared suddenly and attacked Abdul Rahman. Rahman was a tour guide for the national park and he couldn't defend himself. He attempted to do so with a stick, but the Komodo bit his right calf. After the Komodo attacked, another guide was able to come over and help. When the other guide aided Rahman, the Komodo was driven away. This attack, on Tuesday, marked the second this month in the Komodo National Park. In the last attack, 2 park employees were hospitalized. In the wild, Komodo dragons are found in eastern Indonesian islands. These islands are Komodo, Padar, and Rungka. Komodo dragons are currently endangered, and there are only about 4,000 alive today. These animals can grow over 3 meters or about 10 feet.
Despite a stormy political climate, Indonesia has one of the most rapidly growing economies in Asia. With increased spending on infrastructure and new factories after a decade of restructuring for banks and companies, investment now accounts for nearly a third of the GDP. Imports of machinery and mechanical equipment are increasing at incredible speeds. However, this boom is posing some issues, as weak exports are causing a collapse in the trade balance. Last year, Indonesia posted its first annual trade deficit since the late 1960s, ending a 14-year run of surpluses, and even following a $26 billion surplus in 2011. Pressure has since been put on the rupiah, one of Asia's least stable currencies. This economic flip-flopping has caused many Indonesian politicians to promote nationalist policies designed to favor domestic businesses, including insisting that the country's mines eventually be majority owned by Indonesians and raising royalties to be paid by foreign miners.
On Sunday, October 8, 2012, Mount Locken began to erupt. Fresh lava and ash started coming out from the volcano in northeast Indonesia, and authorities began to warn residents. Mount Locken erupted around 2:05 p.m. after a number of loud thumping noises. The volcano was covered in so much haze that it was difficult to discern how many eruptions had really occurred. The eruptions continued for some time, speeding up to 1,500 meters in the air at a time. The ash from the volcano can be quite detrimental to citizens' health, and many people living within a 2.5-kilometer radius of the volcano had been told to limit outdoor activity as much as possible. Occurrences such as this are not so uncommon in Indonesia, as it is located on the Ring of Fire. This is an arc of fault lines circling the Pacific Basin that is prone to earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. In fact, Locken is one of the 2 twin peaks that are about 2.2 kilometers apart. It is also one of the most active volcanoes in the region, at 200 meters high with a very flat top.
Recently, Indonesia has had an increase in religiously aimed attacks. The Christian church as well as other areas of the Islam religion are being targeted by Islamic gangs. The Human Rights Watch is becoming increasingly concerned that the government of Indonesia is, quote, passively and sometimes actively condoning these new terrorists. This is in a juxtaposition with the destruction of other terrorists within the last decade. The president of Indonesia was directly accused, saying that he had weakly responded to the threats made. Within 2012, there were 264 violent attacks on the minorities, which is an increase of 20% since 2010. Another minority sect of the religion was specifically targeted during this time, as well as atheists, moderates, and Shiite Muslims. Because of this violence, almost 500 churches were being forced to close. The main perpetrators of this violence are hardline groups like the Islamic Defenders Front, or FPI, which has been around since 1998. This group arose after a Sunni Islam majority after the fall of the president. The FBI recruits individuals from the poor, which contributes to their 100,000 supporters base. This group was supposedly set up by the police to repress protesters, and there are governors, police chiefs, and religious affairs minister among their supporters. Though Indonesian government guarantees religious freedom in its constitution, there is a minority religious discrimination throughout the years. Oftentimes, victims like atheist Alexander An are punished instead of their attackers. In the case of Alexander, he was sent to prison after being attacked by a mob, none of whom had any punishment.
There is evidence of humans living in Indonesia dating back from 1.5 million years ago, but the more accurate records of history begin in the 7th century, when the Buddhist and Hindu empires were fighting for power in Indonesia. Later, in the 13th century, the Muslims came and took over most of the area, forcing the Hindus to retreat to Bali, where they remain today. Now, about 80% of the population in Indonesia is Muslim. In the 16th century, the Portuguese arrived in Indonesia. They were among the first Europeans to arrive, and in the following centuries, there were a number of conflicts dealing with the rule of Indonesia. The Portuguese had a relatively short rule, as they were soon overtaken by the Dutch. They named the area the Dutch East Indies, and their rule continued until World War II, when the Japanese invaded. However, the Japanese eventually surrendered, and the Dutch resumed rule once more. However, after that, a bloody war for independence began, starting on the 17th of August in 1945 and ending on December 27th in 1949, when the Indonesians were victorious at last. Following this independence, there was a decade of instability, which eventually ended when Suharto began to rule, ushering in a period of economic growth.
Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, Indonesia's national motto, is an old Japanese phrase meaning unity in diversity. Indonesia's culture is built upon the Pancasila, or 5 principles, first formulated by President Sukarno in 1945. These include belief in one supreme God, just and civilized humanitarianism, Indonesian unity, popular sovereignty governed by wise policies arrived at through deliberation and representation, and social justice for all Indonesian people. Much emphasis is placed in its culture on resistance to colonialism and communism, and the celebration of national heroes and leaders such as Abdul Muiz and Muhammad Hatta. The customary adat law, which differs from region to region, dictates the rules of social life and rites of passage. It has also been hugely important in maintaining equal rights for women in Indonesia. All aspects of Indonesian culture, including art, music, language, and law, have come from a fusion of European, Chinese, Malay, and Arabic cultural elements. These have also been influenced by various religions prevalent throughout the area, and the ancient trade routes between the Far East and the Middle East. The official language of Indonesia is Indonesian, or Bahasa Indonesia, and the most common dialect found within the islands is Javanese.
With 300 different cultures, there are many kinds of traditional sports, games, and leisure throughout the country. Such sports include cockfighting, which is popular on Bali Island. Although it was decreed illegal by Indonesian government, the sport has merely moved underground. Opponents strap sharp steel spurs called taji onto the cock's left leg before the fight and encourage the cocks to peck at each other. The excitement builds as the spectators cheer on the side they betted on, and the cocks fight until one can no longer stand and a winner is announced. Bull racing on Madra Island is another popular sport. In this sport, the jockey is usually a small young boy who rides on a wooden plow pulled by a pair of bulls. The bulls race to the finish line and can run a course of about 100 meters in 10 to 15 seconds. Stone jumping on Nias Island is another sport that originated from a ritual that young men went through to achieve manhood, in which they leapt over a 2 meter high stone wall. The top of the stone walls were covered with spikes and sharp objects, such as bamboo. Stone jumping was also used to train warriors to jump over enemy walls. Sepak takraw is another popular sport that is similar to volleyball. A hollow ball made of rattan is kicked around, and players may use their heads, legs, and feet, not their hands, to hit the ball. Indonesia also participates in many modern sports such as soccer and badminton. As with any country blessed with so many natural attractions, the countryside of Indonesia has a lot to offer in terms of recreation. Indonesia is an exotic destination with lovely beaches where you can enjoy the sun and the ocean. Striking contrast of colors, one-of-a-kind flora and fauna. Just about every island in Indonesia has a great opportunity for hiking and camping. The numerous mountains and national parks are perfect places to explore.
Today in Indonesia, it will be a high of 86 and a low of 75, with a 97% chance of precipitation. Tomorrow will be a high of 86 and a low of 81, with only a 60% chance of precipitation. On Wednesday, it will be a high of 86 and a low of 77, with a 70% chance of precipitation. Thursday is a high of 90 and a low of 75, and a 70% chance of precipitation. While on Friday and Saturday, there will be a high of 86 and a low of 75 and 81 respectively. There will be no rain on Friday, while there is a 50% chance of precipitation on Saturday. On Sunday, there is a high of 86 and a low of 73, with a 90% chance of precipitation. The weekly weather forecast follows the general weather patterns of Indonesia. Temperature itself is usually around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. In addition, the humidity is usually 70 to 90% year-round. Monsoons blow in south to east during June through September, while in December through March, monsoons blow in from the northwest. Thus, this time of year we are experiencing monsoons from the northwest.